Welcome everybody to Root Rebel Radio, and if you tuned in last week, hopefully this video will actually be working instead of looking at us doing the time-lapse boogie. Episode 2, Season 2. What can people expect today?
Hi everybody. And basically you should have said that's exactly how we wanted to record it. It was deliberate.
It's art.
Exactly.
Don't mess with my art.
If you don't understand it, it's art. So.
Exactly.
But we thought this time now we're going to do a normal video that you can actually follow.
Yeah.
Might be more engaging for you guys.
Progress. So, what's the theme for this week?
The theme is follow the leader.
Follow the leader, follow the leader. For people that don't know the song, this sound really awkward, but it's a sort of carnival song from...
We're committed to awkward.
Exactly. Follow the leader. What does that mean?
Well, we'll discover it.
Yeah.
Just like every episode, we'll unpack it and we'll shed some light on it. And I think we've done a pretty good job last week with Lost in Translation.
Yeah, I really like that conversation.
Yeah. And follow the leader, for me, that's something we're raised with, right? You follow some leader, some kind of...
Yeah.
In this world, in this life.
Somebody who has seemingly authority in a specific field.
In this society, some authority or somebody who makes a big statement or has a big presence.
Yeah.
And usually puts up a theme that a lot of people can attach to.
Yeah.
Whether that's politics or...
But we're not really talking about that one. We were talking about following the leader in yourself. And I think we've just unpacked the same subject in our own lives. That hence the reason for this podcast name. In this journey, there's often a moment where you turn the tables around from looking to the outside, to outside leaders, outside authorities, and there is a moment in this journey where you have an option to proclaim, oh, I'm creating my own reality. So basically, I'm the sovereign. I'm the leader of my own. Everything I create is mine. It's coming from me, the God within, if you will. But we've known this for quite a while, right? But then getting to that true leadership or the true understanding of what sovereignty is. And last week's episode, how do you then translate that leadership into the human counterpart, the everyday counterpart of how do you live it? How do you talk about it? How do you act it? So
there's so many steps leading up even to that point where
you don't say
you even contemplate taking your own leadership back, and even understanding what it means to be a leader. Right, because it's looking on the outside, we are observing a certain attitude that leaders have, a certain relatability, but most of all, power, right? Leadership, for me, that's also when you are on the journey of self-discovery. I think you, at some point, go like, nobody's leading me at all. Right, but at that point you haven't claimed your own leadership, so you just want to walk away from power. So I think the detachment of that.
I agree with that. So it's almost like you proclaim that, okay, it's not outside, it's inside. And what I did is I rebelled to any form, kind of my whole life, but especially after that moment.
Root rebels.
Ding 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 ding. I rebelled. I rebelled to any form of authority, any form of leadership. But kind of secretly, I looked up to now spiritual leaders or leaders in the field of...
you just replace it.
Sovereignty that then now I look up to. And they got less and less. But ultimately, it was... I had people in my life that I go, I want to be like that. That's what leadership looks to me. That's what being a balanced human being looks like to me. And over time, I think it sort of dissipated into, shit, it has to be me. Because I can't do it the same way. No matter how clever or how balanced that person is, it's their version of sovereignty and leadership. Because I do think it's good to make a distinction between leadership like we see in the world being a good manager, being good with people, or sometimes a good leader is also known as, okay, you make your monthly quota, and the numbers for the shareholders look really good every year. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good person with...
Yeah, so who are you asking, right?
It's all a perspective. Yeah. So you can't really adopt any type of definition for leadership looking at the outside. Yet that's our only reference, right? So I think that's, for me, it was really, and I'm still sort of chewing on it, hard to take full responsibility for my own leadership without looking to somebody else for guidance or approval.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin is becoming a follower, because every leader needs a follower. And if you're a follower, you place your sovereignty outside of yourself. So it's that part of being comfortable with being in the following role, because that takes away the responsibility of accountability.
Yeah. It's another rock to hide behind, right?
Yeah, and I think for many people that works up to a certain point. When maybe the restrictions of being a follower become too much, when it becomes too limited, I think that's when people revolt. And of course, there's political situations, there's the basic survival strategies that, if it becomes too tight, you sort of either have to escape it or you have to stand up for yourself. So there's so many forms of leadership, and then also looking at what society teaches us, the leaders that we always have to be when you're a father or a mother or just a strong friend that takes care of somebody who needs support. So going into the leadership, stepping into that role, I think everybody has a reference to that and has a story around that. But then, like you say, what is it that inspires me about leaders? Mm-hmm. What is it that I don't want to be? And I think ultimately for me it comes down to, if you haven't yet infused it with sovereignty and true presence and your own light, then you're always following or you're always guiding with power.
Yeah, so that's your definition of a leader.
Yeah, and of course, that's also culturally, we keep talking about the fun reference of being German, just put a mustache on me and do my hair way a certain way, then, I'll be that leader, the Führer. So but and again, I find it so interesting to also debunk the whole narrative we have around, you can't even say certain words anymore without it having a certain
connotation.
Meaning. And come back to a lot of references of season 1. Again, if you haven't listened to it, you might want to go back.
It's good.
And talking about the cancel culture and talking about how difficult it is these days to even say things, or
turning it around, how important it is to really be guided by your own flow and your own thoughts and your own truths. Really be the standard or be the leader in your own world, in your own, what's the word for it? Your own presence. Yeah. So if the whole world is completely confused and you look for leadership there, but every week the definition of leadership changes, the definition of what you can say or not say changes. And we don't even know if certain information that we get through news outlet is true anymore. And instead of going into this wild, conspiracy thing, or siding on the side of left or right or center or that particular leader and the other ones are crazy, the best thing is to get comfortable in your own leadership, in your own seat, in your own knowingness of, while the whole world is being confused, at least I'm a standard for myself. I know where my truth is, where my true north is.
And that's the meaning of, or that's what life does. It puts you into a certain reflection mode.
Yeah.
Through comparison, through interactions, through the mirror of the other. Mm-hmm. So only through projection can you know yourself, into a certain understanding of self. and then, yeah, like you say, put up some boundaries. That's usually how it starts, right? It's like, especially when you're in a lower position of power or of standing or authority, then, and we see it on the world stage at the moment. I find it really important that people stand up for their rights.
Yeah.
So it's also, it is such a fine line between blaming the world for being the way it is, and saying, well, I'm just doing the work on myself and fuck everybody else. That's also not the solution, right?
No, and I do agree. It's really hard if you feel you're marginalized, whether it's culturally, whether it's sexually or racially. Like any type of marginalization usually sparks the first rebellion and the first, I'm done with this stuff. And it's easy for me to say, like a white male, living in Amsterdam.
Privileged, yeah.
Exactly, very privileged. But in the end, it comes down to the same. Where is the leadership in yourself? Where is your truth? Whether other people marginalize you or not, are you going to stand up and be the change instead of wait for the change, or have to have millions of people around you to rally for the change? Of course it helps if I saw an article the other day, if all women decide to, equal rights or bust, and all women decide to basically stop having children, they could wipe out humanity. Or if they all decide to stop working tomorrow, you destabilize the entire economy. So it's those choices that could be really, really big, but I think ultimately it's not about rallying together about really big issues. It's about, what do you feel as a woman that you feel is a balanced way of living, and ask for your truth on your boss for equal pay, or start your own company. Go, fuck the boss. I'm done with this shit. I'm going to start my own company and work with people and do what I ask from other people myself. Yeah. So I think it's a big shift, but I also think it's hard because there's still a thing. There's still a big mass consciousness out there that there is a lot of inequality, and there's a lot of sort of false leadership, or leadership that is still using old power or old hierarchy dynamics. And a lot of people that complain about it, but also buy into that. So I think ultimately, if you really want to get out of it, it has to come somewhere from within.
And I think going back to last week's episode, I think we also talked about there's truth in everything, and everybody is right in one way or another. So every motivation at some point seemed a good idea. That's why I find it so difficult to speak on world matters or politics, or like even society structure, cultural, religious, whatever it is. As soon as it becomes this bigger picture,
it gets sticky.
It gets super sticky,
yeah.
and then there's this fraction that says, oh, but you should have said this and use your position wisely. You now have an audience or whatever. That's why I think it's a very nice comfort zone for me to only speak about my experience, and to, whenever I go into my job description as a coach, to work with the individual, or even when you work with a team, to say, what's that part of you that can contribute to a healthy surrounding. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
Just oftentimes we get it confused with, but first I need to make sure that the other person's people treat me in a certain way, and then I can be that leader, or it doesn't work that way.
Or I used to say that myself a lot. There has to be a certain environment or certain outcome or certain safety, and then I can be that standard. I can sort of like thrive and be safe and blah blah blah. But ultimately, there's always something. There's always somebody who feels unsafe. There's always a structure that I'm in where you go like, ooh, I wouldn't have chosen that one. So it's a really tricky one.
But you bring it back to Maslow's hierarchy of personal needs, really. There's a certain bare minimum of how you need to make sure that you can change certain things in your life. First, you need to be safe, you need to be fed, you need to be loved in a certain way. There's certain things.
Yeah.
I think.
And I completely agree.
But
because how safe can you to let it all come from within, and especially in the first, when you first start doing it. I think when you have more experience with it, it kind of shifts. But when you first have that awareness, everything around me is a reflection of me. I remember the first steps were very unsafe. So I was already in an unsafe world, an unsafe hierarchy that I was complaining about nonstop, but I was too afraid of really stepping out of it. So I kept in a stalemate of complaining about it, but yeah, shit, I need it. Without them, I can't do it, but I hate it, but without them, I can't do it. And the loop went on and on until I was safe enough to go, okay, I can do this myself. But that took a long time.
Yeah, and then again, what is a long time, right? Like,
relatively, it was actually super fast.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I think once you understand that everything is a reflection of what you send out, we talked about last week as well, like the mind is a great signal sender, the heart is the magnet that receives. So if I know that there's a certain dynamic going on, then I can see the bigger picture, and that for me, the understanding of self is like, that's going to be my life's theme, because it never stops, right? As long as I'm in this physical body, as long as I'm interacting with life, I will keep learning about myself and about what I call forth, what kind of response I call forth. And then it's my responsibility. So I think now playing with the concept of leadership becomes more fun because I'm taking ownership.
Yeah.
So whatever feedback comes back, I can see as negative and say, well, that's really uncomfortable, or, flip the finger to everybody and say, it's just nobody really understands me, and say, asshole. But ultimately it is a message to me to go, okay, where wasn't I clear? Or where am I still playing certain roles that are misguiding, misleading, or confusing for other people, so that they have to react towards me and say like, but you're not really showing up, right?
And it's funny that you say that, because the outside is always a really good reflection, literally, and it might feel unsafe, or it might feel that you're being attacked, or the big one, not seen. But ultimately, if you pay attention to your surroundings, the people you attract, the people you hang with, the people you work for, and the feedback that comes back, it's usually very clear. Hey, shit, where am I saying yes when it's a no? Where am I saying no when it's a yes? And who of the people that I work with, I feel, there's a flow that's happening. I can stay in intuition and have a very clear explanation of what I'm trying to achieve with that feeling that I want to take into action. But then the people you work with, if the same loop happens back, you go, okay, gives me energy, there's an expansion. No matter what I say, if the other person has a counterpoint, we have a healthy discussion, and it still feels expansive. Oh, great! Those are good collaborators. But ultimately, no matter how good the collaborators look, this is a tongue twister, collaborator. No matter how good they look, ultimately there always will be a point where that collaborator has a different, maybe slept wrong, or has some events in their life happening, where it's ultimately, no matter how wonderful it is and how many rainbows shoots out of which ass, you have to be the leader of your communication. So you're responsible on the human side to constantly channel, or to constantly communicate what intuition you had, and how your human likes to experience that in something physical. And that's leadership.
The greatest test playground. Get a few kids, or get a dog, and then it will become pretty clear if you are in your clarity and in your presence and in your communication, and where you are sort of going into the power game.
Yeah.
I think
I'm gonna get a dog.
Yeah, don't do the kids part. And it's a very lengthy experiment if you go through that.
Yeah, I heard.
But that's the thing, like constantly checking myself, what's the feedback that I'm getting now, and not sitting on the high throne.
Well, like we said yesterday,
letting the ego get in the way of that.
Being willing to look at all of the feedback is also you. If it's all you, then also the feedback is you. And you can fight with the feedback, or you can say, okay, it feels uncomfortable, but it's me. So what is it saying? What is it saying about, that's true leadership, is not being afraid to make mistakes, not putting the whip to yourself, like, oh my God, I fucked it up, I did it wrong, for longer than, it needs to, but preferably not. Forgive yourself, move on. So that you can really listen to the feedback.
Yeah. In what situations that you can recall of your life has there been like an instant, no, that needs to change, and why?
Well, Jesus, many. But usually the change came, for me personally, the change came in a nutshell for basically doing the same thing over and over and over and over. So, and I felt intuitively, this is not the place to work anymore. These are not the people that I need to work with anymore. This is not the communication. I'm not really being clear, and my unclarity or my confusion or my trying to not trying to upset anybody actually created much more confusion. So that system, and it's very old, being seen, being heard is the basis of it. But, and the system of really wanting to be liked, because that was my survival mechanism in this lifetime. Those two was it just kept looping. And at a certain point, it got so very, very boring. It's like no matter who I upset, I need to step out of this. Because if this is life for me, and I had a couple of moments in my life, then I'm just going to leave. And again, not very dramatically, but it's like, okay, I have an opportunity to be clear, and to be clear mostly to myself before I can be clear to others. So it was always that annoying person there, that annoying boss there. Oh, the world is so fucked up. No. The communication with yourself. And being honest, where am I playing the game of pretending I have leadership or authority over myself, but then not willing to look at certain things, or circumventing certain situations that feel uncomfortable, or keeping certain agendas. So I'm really free. I have no agenda, and on the under the desk is like 6 agendas running.
Well, those are the more I think the more difficult defined roles of leadership, where the lines blur, and where it's not so clear. Because if you look at the strict business sense of good leadership, it's very clear. This is your task. Like, this is what you're responsible for. These are the people that work for you, and this is your goal. So there are some certain parameters that make it very clear for you. This is the field that I interact with. This is how, this is my playground here.
It's a mental, intellectual definition kind of thing.
Yeah. And if it was like that with everything, then it would be very simple. But, like we said, there's many different nuances to it, and ultimately you have to break it down to it. It's about presence within your own agency. Yeah.
But I'd love to continue talking about what you just said. So the world at large, or mass consciousness definition of good leadership, is that you do your task well, and you work well with the people that are entrusted to you or that you lead to do the task. But what we're talking about is the extra element of intuition and flow and synchronicity. I think to a certain extent charisma, I think that comes from it. So it's almost bringing that, well, sort of vague element. I mean, for us it's not vague, but for the world at large, usually it's like, what are you talking about, feeling or intuition? These are numbers, and we have a big, investor meeting at the end of the year. So, but a lot of business leaders that are really good, you hear talk about, I don't know why I did that. It's completely out of the ordinary. I had a feeling. Or I just, my gut told me to go left at the traffic lights. Like Elon Musk, who constantly does something that everybody goes, okay, you're making billions of dollars. Why the hell would you start a new company, risk it all, put everything on red, like with Twitter? And then after a while they go, oh shit, there's like a really strong intuition part, but then coupled with a very strong leadership sense and knowing how to execute something that has not been done before. So it's usually in history always these people that combine the strong intuition with...
We call it intuition. I think, that's the difficult part of the whole journey of self-discovery, that there's a certain terminology that you use within the tribe, that you use within the rebels, that you identify with or that you can relate to. But ultimately, it's about being able to communicate with everybody, and so that everybody understands. And I think what you're talking about with certain inventors or change makers or whatever, we call it intuition. We see a certain overall dynamic or energy pattern there, and we say, well, of course, there's an intuition, and then there's acting on the intuition and bringing it into, action pieces.
Yeah.
But I think a really good leader that is not connected to that part of himself, or a good, stories, film, a good writer, they don't have to be spiritual or know that they are actually working through intuition. It's just their quality, it's their character, it's their personality. And I actually like the whole movement of becoming more aware of those personality traits on the broader scale of the world, that nowadays, and you can sort of discuss if it's right or wrong, like in the bigger companies, they are doing the Myers-Briggs tests, like the personality tests, to make sure that you are in a good, that you're in a good position, and that you're also maybe not like a what do you call those?
Like a personality type.
Or you're not a threat to the system, basically, right? So they make sure that you're placed in the right context, which I think is important.
Yeah.
Again, looking at interactions in life, it comes down to dynamics between people, and is that a smooth process or not? But
and I do agree with you. It's we call it intuition, but maybe our listeners call it something else, and maybe the top of the business gurus out there would call it just common sense, or it doesn't really matter. But I do feel personally that's what I see with the Steve Jobs, who had his own share of problems with being very dominant and having trouble with some social interactions.
Lost in translation.
Exactly. Here we go. But also was was a Zen Buddhist in a way, and had so much passion and intuition of, I don't know why, but I'm going to fight for keep making things, doing things a way that nobody believed in. And he was even fired from his own company for it. And in the end, he was right. People can argue the way he did it, but I always find it fascinating to pick up on that intuition part, or that part where they go, I just know, and just let me do it. Ridley Scott, for instance, famous English director who did Gladiator and Alien, Blade Runner, and that sort of films. He had people visit his set that were the money guys and basically arguing with him on Blade Runner where they put the pillars in the wrong, like they put them upside down for a scene. And a normal person would look at the pillars. Well, there's a bit on front and there's a bit on the bottom, and the bit on the bottom was wider. So there was a certain way that he felt it needed to be put. So he gets to set, and then he finds out the pillars were in the wrong, so basically upside down. And a normal person and one of the investors on the set said, well, what does it matter? Because changing the background will basically cost us half a day of not filming. It was just a miscommunication between the art director. And he had a huge conversation with the art director and one of the money people. And in the end, he said, but just don't rationalize with me. Just don't rationalize something that for you is intellectual or mental, or, oh, but that's obvious because I'm the artist here. This is my vision. So for me, having the broader side of the pillar on a certain angle is my choice to make as an artist. You don't rationalize with me about it. And it's as close as it gets to what we're talking about. Is like, I have a feeling, now trust me to execute that feeling.
But with artists, it's easier because in a way we all know that they are channeling art from another realm. Even if you're not spiritual, you can probably agree on it's they're in a fantasy world that they get their vision from. And here comes a huge piece to that puzzle, what you just said. So you talk about intuition, and you talk about good leadership, like a Steve Jobs, for example. Maybe it's the leaders that have a great vision and feel the vision is their purpose.
Yeah, that's what
That's what we connect with as human beings. And then we go, I'd like some of that, because it just feels like all of a sudden this person seems so much more fulfilled.
Yeah.
Or driven, or or even passionate,
or have the stamina through that purpose to keep going, like an Elon Musk, like a Steve Jobs, in the face of a lot of people not getting it, being fired. So it's, we look up to that types of motivation and inspiration. Like, wow, they're like, everybody told them no for years, and not only were they right.
So just leadership is not in and of itself necessarily motivating or inspiring, is it?
No, because if you can be a very good leader from a certain point of view. If you need to crunch certain numbers or like Nasdaq or trading, you can be an excellent leader, make a lot of money, but it wouldn't necessarily be a passion that an artist has for a certain vision. Yeah. Then again, you can't say to those people, oh, you don't have vision. No. Because they do. Their vision might be making money, or their vision might be devising a completely different system of trading that nobody's ever thought of, and then upset or disrupt the market. So you can't define it.
It comes down to everybody is right in their own way. Yeah. So it has many different expressions, but for me, the realization now after this exchange with you is, and that's why I love this podcast so much, because it just puts stuff into perspective in my
It could be, we could be brain. Doing this podcast or go to therapy. I think this is much better. We're doing it with you.
Tried everything else. Please make your contribution for this session. There's a donate button. No, I do think that for me personally, because I'm so driven by my own inspiration and intuition and, connection with my true self, I like to see that in others too. So I only really get motivated to follow somebody if they can inspire me.
So your specific inclination of leadership or intuition or inspiration.
Yeah, and that happens to be very childlike, romantic, very poetic, there's a certain, people might say airy-fairiness to it. Or I see somebody who's just so clear and so strong and so unwavering in their direction that I'm like, wow, that just blows me away.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny, playing advocate of the devil, because I completely agree with you. But there also have been times where I've seen people that are very strong in their conviction, and I really looked up to them because, like, wow, I wish I was that determined and that this is how we do it. I'm 100% sure, and it's kind of refreshing. You want to follow those people, right? Because there's no doubt, or at least seemingly there's no doubt. But now I think, like, moving into my own leadership more and more, for me personally, I made a very clear distinction between, okay, somebody who comes across as very comfortable in their convictions, and on the other hand, hey, it's their conviction, it's their passion, it's their intuition, it's their whatever you want to call it. So I can't just one-on-one take it over, because it's not mine. I need to come to where they are. I can celebrate them, and then I have to feel, how can I get into my leadership, into my center of conviction. Because if I copy them, I copy their tricks and their ideas and their passion, and they came to that conclusion through a completely different means than I did. So I can't take it over.
Yeah, but there's a certain unwritten agreement in mass consciousness or society that it needs to be somehow broadly accepted. So
Yeah.
just take fashion, for example. You know, I can say somebody inspires me by their sense of fashion, and I'm going to wear the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that give me the same appearance on a certain very broken down level, to strip to the basics? Yeah, probably, but I wear it differently than that person that inspires me. So there's so much more to, that's actually a great example. There's so much more to all of this than just copying something that you see somebody else do.
Yeah, and there's many more of those examples where.
So spiritually now, okay, moving on from the everyday examples, spiritually on your own journey of self-discovery, you use the same system of comparing in your teachers, in your leaders, right, in your gurus, whatever. Oh, I want to be like them, or, you know, apparently you can make money with being a healer, you know, maybe I should become a healer. That's why there's so many light workers out there that are becoming a healer, you know. I think that the confusion is also in the translation of the human mind. How do I, you know, take this inspiration and actually see it for what it is, rather than being misguided by it or flashed.
So how, and I love this discussion. So how do you come to your own leadership? So it's almost like we condense the whole conversation into an end conclusion. So almost like, how do you, when you're still struggling with your own leadership, and usually the signs, in my opinion, are I'm looking outside towards guidance. And sometimes it's great to look outside for guidance or inspiration, but ultimately I'm dependent and at a certain point to others outside of me. Or I'm complaining that I'm in a really shitty situation with other people, but I'm not making a clear choice to get out of it, or a clear choice to communicate to those other people what I want and need, and then make a conclusion. If I don't get it, I'm going to move on and do something else. So it's usually we're happy to complaining, but not actually be clear enough to break the loop. So those are the signs. But how do you, in your, just Sander's opinion, how do you get out of it? How do you get out of the mass consciousness leadership, and how do you get into your own leadership if you're on this path specifically?
There's certain steps, I think. I love this sentence. You got to do what you do until you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So through certain repetition in my experience, my awareness gets strong enough that a certain situation doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
That's step one. I think in every situation that's applicable. Step two is communication. First and foremost with myself. So understanding that I have an agency in this, that I can actually communicate my position. And from that communication can come boundaries or reclaiming certain territory. But then you also run the risk that, you overdo communication. So I think if you change systems, one thing that usually happens when you come out of a very strong pattern is the pendulum goes into the other direction.
Yeah.
So you overshoot the goal.
It takes 2 points to find them in the middle.
Again, you need to overdo it, right? And then rein it back in. So giving myself permission, I did a great podcast on that too, permission granted, that you are the one in charge saying like, okay, something doesn't work for me anymore. Again, the no more.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the no more comes, I have to do it differently. Then I communicate it. And in the best case scenario, I think you find yourselves in a situation or an interaction with somebody where you can say that, where you can say, look, I'm trying to move away from this behavior. I'm trying to change my habit here, my pattern. Please understand that if I come across too much or
contextualizing
too
and
rough,
keeping it to yourself, or keeping it. This is what I need to change. I don't say that you have to agree, but here's me coming from me. Instead of you're doing it wrong, you need to change it so that I feel safe. Well, that could be a part of. You could say I want to feel safe. And this is not a safe situation for me. What can we do about it? It's a different question than you are creating the unsafety.
But then putting the context into it, saying, this is happening within me right now, and certain coping mechanisms could come out. And for me, for example, one coping mechanism that would always be triggered after coming out of something unaware was sarcasm. Like when
passive-aggressive sarcasm.
Passive-aggressive humor, right? That was very destructive for myself and for others. So you basically, you start adding certain ingredients to the mix, and then you notice like, okay, so I need to have awareness, I need to have communication, I need to put context to my communication, then reflection. And then, also the next thing must be kindness. I must be kind to myself and then to my surroundings that are witness to my change.
And also kind if you do have a reaction. I mean, I had it the other week, like the discussion with another person was all about communication. And what do? I go into a reaction. So it's forgiving yourself also for the reaction, but knowing, hey, wait a minute, what is this reaction? So I'm feeling something, I want change, I had enough, I'm communicating that from me to another person, but if the other person doesn't do what I want or what I think is normal, it's again the righteous position. Yeah, but I'm the one that holds the truth. No, you don't. Everybody's right in a certain way. You just have to feel if you're compatible with the other person's truth, and if not, then move on. But then if you're triggered, and usually the trigger is something stupid like not being seen, being heard, actually that's kind of always the trigger, or a certain type of communication that you feel you're entitled to or not. But the moment you react, take it home, and again, sit with yourself, take the time to feel. Is it the same what you say, like before you had enough and you decide, okay, now I'm going to have communication with that person or that party to get me out of that loop? Usually that moment comes by being completely fed up with it, but usually also by taking the time to go, okay, how can I get out of this loop? So feeling it in yourself, taking every responsibility back. And that usually takes like meditation or
and different tries.
Talking to a therapist or walking in the woods.
You need certain rounds of it. Like we're all onion beings. You need to take the onions off, right? the layers off, because I won't get it right immediately.
No.
And I think you know, at some point you might come to a situation where you just go like, "Whoa, fuck that shit, like I'm out," and then you put yourself into a different situation, and through the new situation you get to see new layers of yourself.
Yeah.
Like you always take yourself with you, which can be a good thing, or it can be a curse. But
Yeah.
you will always discover. That's why, you know, leaving old relationships behind at some point can be very good if they're too limiting and, you know, don't do you well or for your growth. But you will always have to look at, you know, what patterns am I reinforcing in those interactions.
And I think ultimately, you know, the ultimate form of leadership, in my opinion, is taking everything back, taking full responsibility of your communication, your wants and needs, your actions, and come to a point. I mean, that's my ideal constellation of it, where I don't need anybody's approval on anything. But what I'm asking or what I'm communicating isn't also depending on anything. So then you're free. And then the only thing I have to do is say, hey, okay, so I had a couple of conversations. I clearly feel that this is not compatible. So then I think another important thing is agenda. So if I have a secret agenda running and I feel it's not compatible, and I set my piece and I set my communication without trying to change the other, which I think that's a big one, then I can just go, it was nice, but I'm going to walk away. I'm going to take myself out of a situation and create a new one. But the moment I have an agenda, and usually it's a secret one, I want that person, you know, I'm not leaving until that person says what I want to hear. I'm not leaving until or you know, there is a dynamic and you want the other person to do something about it, then you're stuck again. So then no amount of communication will actually solve that.
And then you have to also take it in smaller increments, the change, because I'm somebody, I get easily overwhelmed by things that seem unsurmountable, especially when I'm in a pattern and I want to change it. So how do you get from the choice to the end result that I want changed, right? I want to experience that free part of myself, but still there's this huge mountain in between. And I think a great practice also in coaching is start journaling. I'm not a huge journaler. I reluctantly keep a journal randomly, but I keep reminding myself it is a great way to speak to myself. So take it in increments, take it in the day to day. So in the morning, maybe when you wake up and you have, like, you know, everything, your reactions have calmed down, write down the good stuff, write down the goals, like maybe even just for the day, this is how I want to communicate, this is what I want to experience. Reaffirm your choice, come back to, you know, envisioning yourself in the solution, and then take those steps towards it. And then in the evening, it's really important, especially when you tend to overthink a lot, write all of that stuff down. Like,
get it out of your head.
Get it out of your head and say, I've tried my best today. And then put it into, you know, maybe even chapters, you know, what worked really well for me today? Where am I proud of myself? Where was I able to be more of the new version of myself? And what,
so you can witness,
and what results have I already seen how it does work?
So you're basically become a witness to your own process. But instead of having to constantly need the outside to do it for you. It works also, but I think then you tend to get into the outside loops again. And
then you get confused again, and then you get overwhelmed again. And I think that's why structuring your thoughts in order to quiet them down can be helpful before you start meditating, for example. Because if it's just in the head, I've noticed that, being a very overthinker, mental person, it does help me.
Get it out of the head, don't take it to bed.
Yeah.
And it's for me personally, was like in the mornings, it was very much like I wake up immediately, like the moment my eyes open, whatever is not sort of, you know, nicely integrated or whatever I'm worried about immediately starts running. Like, and then to distract from that, I immediately take up my phone, you know, mails, SMSs, which usually then sets me off. Oh my God, I need to do this and this and this. Then to not feel it, I'll watch the news. Well, that really helps, with all of the stuff. And I'm not saying don't watch the news, but for me, it just immediately gets me into mental land, reaction lands, mass consciousness before I even had a coffee. And so what I do now is I wake up and I don't look at my phone. And I wake up, I have a shower, I have a quiet moment of at least half an hour where I'm just sit and be and make a coffee. I don't need to meditate per se, but just be with myself. And a lot of uncomfortable thoughts come up because now I'm quiet. Can't help it. And then when those thoughts, when I know what they are, I can go, okay, I'll deal with that later. Oh, I can just feel this. It's out on the table. I don't have to instantly do something or solve it. But I've looked at it, I felt into it, and in a place of quiet, I can now easily have the space in that me space to go, okay, I don't have to do anything with this. This thing is step 20. I only need to know step 1. Okay, there's a huge reaction here. So what am I reacting to here? Okay. Oh, I'm just afraid of this and this. Okay, great. That's a great insight. You don't have to then do something with it. Just acknowledge it, move on. But just that moment, that half hour in the morning a day, is so much more constructive than immediately getting up and going into the
rabbit hole
of my own head, because I can't blame the news or mass consciousness. I take up the iPhone. I look at Instagram for half an hour before I had any sort of sovereign thought of myself. And then I wonder why I'm going into the day like all shaky. So,
and also knowing, how the brain works. So I need to take the human programming into account. The brain is programmed like that. You wake up in the morning and the first thing that you get your happiness from or a rush from will determine your day.
Yeah.
That's also how the body works. Not just how the brain works, how the body works. So the body, gets a very sugar-loaded breakfast. It will crave sugar for the rest of the day. So certain things are so obvious, and we don't want to go near them because at least we know how that works, right? But taking the agency of leadership back into my realm, where I can influence my well-being in a world that tells you don't be selfish.
Yeah.
That is rebellion 101.
The rebellion, the revolution starts within. Yeah. And I just thought of another thing that while you were talking is that I completely lost what I was going to say. This happens a lot, by the way. You got this is brilliant. Poof.
You immediately integrate it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, taking agency of what you can affect, what you know, and then not trying to just go la 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 that doesn't exist. And sometimes you might need a couple of attempts to it. But it starts in the small things where I'm somebody, I have great visions, I have a great goal that I'm working towards, but sometimes that's just way too big. It leaves me ignoring the details of the moment, and it leaves me not being in the present moment.
Yeah.
So taking yourself back when it gets too overwhelming, making sure you get new references.
Yeah.
If I don't interact, I will never get references. That's what we talked about last week.
So there's also a part in doing or taking action.
Talking about it last week in Lost in Translation, being lost in that whole translation of just being the human. Now all of a sudden awareness comes into it. I retreat from life, pandemic hits, I don't even know who I am anymore, but I found a new connection with myself. Now I have to go out, practice that, and then see what position am I observing myself in that's new.
Yeah, and giving yourself the space and the time to discover that, like the onion, the little moments in each day. You don't have to do a 180 and blow up your situation immediately. Resulting, you might get fired, and then you don't have money. So there is a more elegant way of doing this.
It could also be a great learning
and sometimes
curve,
you just have to blow it up. I remember what I was going to say. I think also the difficulty, and again, looking at my own life and a situation that I had last week, taking full responsibility for yourself and everything in your life, and acknowledging that everything that is around your life or the people that are around you is a reflection of you. And if you really want to change it, you can, right? But I think for me, and that is a huge one, it was sometimes very hard to change, because subconsciously, and now it's becoming more aware, or now I'm becoming more aware of it, if I step into my full leadership, and again, this is according to my definition of the intuition and the human counterpart really dancing together, if it's really, really, really the leadership that I know that I have an ambition of, there is no more playing games. Mm-hmm. There is no more playing games of the little mouse, my communication, or then banging my fist on the table because I really want to do something, and I just did an assertiveness course, and I'm going to let people how good I communicate because it's the same side of the coin. Or I'm completely free to communicate my truth, but then have hidden agendas under it. So I cannot play any games anymore. True leadership, you mean everything's transparent, mostly to yourself. So then when you go out, that's it. People can agree or not agree, but you're not dependent on it. But it does mean you have to stop the games yourself, and not a few, but all of them.
And I actually refer to it as a very selfish reason why I want to experience my own leadership, because I want to see the results of my clarity. I want to see the result of who Sandra is becoming constantly. And I don't want games reflected back to me. I don't want to encounter any more confusion. I want to have the clear reflection of who I am in life. And, if it's not compatible, that it doesn't mean that everything needs to be compatible. Quite on the contrary, I'll probably know 90% of the time that, this might not be for me, but then I can walk away from it, and then I don't have any more, logs in that fire, and, here's that hidden agenda. So if you don't want life to reflect confusion back to you, just be fucking clear yourself. It's that simple.
Well, and I love that, because who is the real Sandra? Who's the real Jonathan? And with real, for me the definition is a playful, lighthearted way of combining my intuition with all of my passions and executing them, mm-hmm. whether it's making a film or. So I'm not saying, I don't want to work hard anymore, or I'm afraid of really complex projects. Actually, I love complex projects, but there's a certain home base, a certain it's ground zero in both the human executing it and the passion and the inspiration that keeps coming in, and then there's a dance between the two. And a lot of people in the past refer to it, when a project certainly clicks into. I don't know why, but the project suddenly clicked, and mm-hmm. everything worked together, and everybody just had a really good time, and we don't know what happened, but something was really hard for a couple of weeks, and bang, it clicked. So I love to discover who I am in that situation, and keeping my old agendas, no matter how much pain they protect, or no matter how much things that I want, they kind of keep. I think they attract. I know if I keep doing it in the old way, it's going to attract in the old way. And I'm so bored with, because it's also, we made a movie about this. So we analyzed it to death. So as long as I keep agendas, as long as I keep fighting, as long as there's a separation between me and another world, I'm going to experience it. And instead of, hey, there is another world, a collective consciousness that we all play with, but I want to play with me, not needing anything from me to me, reflected through the outside back to me, and have fun with it. And boy, what could I do? But it does mean I kind of know I run out of excuses. I run out of games. I run out of things to hide. So it's more painful hiding things than now just taking them and go, oh, actually, that's not that bad.
Yeah.
That's true leadership for me. It's going through or saying whenever you have a escalation with somebody or you had a reaction to say shit to that person or to that group, I want to experience this, but in my reaction to you, I've done this. This is not what I want, and I'm sorry. But it's also taking all of that stuff back of, oh, I'm doing it wrong, I'm not seen, I failed. Who gives a shit?
And that's
as long as you can own up to
out
it.
of it, I think.
Yeah.
Taking those games out of it where, you sort of lie to yourself or to others,
Yeah.
right? And keep a little bit of it like close to your chest going like, yeah, but I'm not going to give away that part. Yeah, if you're honest with yourself, if you wanna have a clear reflection of life back to you, experience ease and grace, synchronicities, magic.
Then listen to this podcast.
I had a great...
No, I'm joking.
No, magic or bust. We talked about it. The choices that you make. So there are certain steps that you can really plan and how you can facilitate yourself. I think that's all we ever talk about. Like how this is the journey, whether you come from the spiritual angle or whatever. But there's some dynamics that you will encounter within yourself, and here's two rebels that might have burned their fingers a few times too often.
At least we get to fill a good show with
We've
it.
got the scars to prove it. Yeah, exactly.
This was awesome. I hope this was awesome for you guys too.
Yeah.
Now that you can see us. Hopefully.
Yeah, and if it's
I haven't looked back at it, so
and
it
if
might
it's
be.
if it's not awesome to see us, just go to the audio recording on Spotify or wherever you listen to this. Might be good to actually not be distracted by the visuals. But I enjoy seeing you. I enjoy being seen, and we'll be back next week. If you have any feedback that you would like to share with us, let's see if I can get it right this week. Podcast at rude-rebels.com.
That's the one.
That's the one. You can
And also, if you
email.
want to share stuff like, okay, what is your definition of leadership? What is your magic or bust? Where is your lost in translation? So really keep talking on the comment section on the YouTube channel, because it's a great place also to share ideas and to test some of these peeling of the onions with others. So
Yeah, and again, what we do with each other, the accountability, the reflection through the other, through the conversation. If there's a topic that you would like to have us reflect on, super happy to take that on as an inspiration for the next one or for one of the next ones, like we did with episode 10 of season 1. I love that. And we hope you're well. We hope the week is great, and we'll see you again. When?
no idea.
Next week, Friday.
Bye bye.